Do you believe in God? Are you religious?
No.
Do you believe in God?
No.
Soros told us he believes God was created by man, not the other way around, which may be why he thinks he can smooth out the world's imperfections.
The time for playing is over. It's been over, but it's really over.
Let's not be dramatic here.
Oh, gosh.
Do we all know what we've got ourselves into?
Welcome to the Great Reset.
Do we know where we're likely to be going? And who is going to lead us?
In January, Soros pledged $1 billion to take on the spread of nationalism through a new university network for teaching and research. Claiming this was, quote, the most important project of his life, Soros hopes to build on the open society.
And why is he such a polarizing figure?
For God's sake, this man cannot remain in power.
So far, that hasn't happened. I'm not saying it can't, but it seems unlikely. As a former KGB guy.
Pro-democracy demonstration.
Billionaire hedge fund tycoon George Soros is best known in the UK as the man who broke the Bank of England. Claiming this was, quote, the most important project of his life, Soros hopes to build on the Open Society Foundation's work.
The city of Severodonetsk has witnessed some of the most intense street fighting so far. Russia has been forced to fight neighborhood by neighborhood, street by street, pulverizing homes and office buildings. There is no official count on the number of dead, but the losses are horrific. This video from the Sumy region is of a home that caught fire after it was struck by a Russian shell.
Of all the financial titans and philanthropists of the 20th century, none are more complex or mysterious than George Soros. Like Carnegie, J.P. Morgan, and the Rockefellers, he amassed billions through ruthless business decisions, only to turn around and give away most of his fortune to advance his own personal philosophy.
Whispering, do or die.
He can move world financial markets simply by voicing an opinion, or destabilize a government by buying and selling its currency. He also pledged more aid last year to help people in Russia than the U.S. government did. But now George Soros is worried. He thinks the global economy is coming apart at the seams, and that the world needs to be protected from people like George Soros.
At least about 10 homes in the vicinity suffered the same fate. People who have the means have already fled from the cities of eastern Ukraine. But those who are caught in the crossfire are spending time in bomb shelters, or even worse, in their bombed and shattered homes, with little hope to look forward to.
We may now think that everything is fine, but the fact is that the system is broke and it needs fixing.
What you're doing is asking some form of regulation to protect the world against you.
Well, I am a player, and I think all players should be regulated. There have to be rules of the game.
Buy 48,000. Buy him 69,000 YUM.
Right now, his Quantum Group hedge fund moves $14 billion of rich investors' money around the world every day, looking for profits and answering to no one. Soros makes huge bets on whole countries and economies. Last year, when he saw cracks in the Asia boom, he began selling the currency in Thailand. Traders in Hong Kong followed suit, triggering a financial crisis that plunged much of Asia into a depression.
The Ukrainian soldiers are putting up a spirited fight. Last week, the Brotherhood of Europe assured more aid and more weapons to the Ukrainians. And this week, Kiev has moved one step closer to becoming a member of the European Union. But amidst the diplomacy, Ukraine is losing ground that it may never recover.
In the last 2 years, you've been blamed for financial collapse of Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Japan. in Russia?
All of the above.
All of the above.
Yeah.
Are you that powerful?
No, I think there's a great misunderstanding.
The Prime Minister of Malaysia said that the region spent 40 years trying to build up its economy, and along comes a moron like Soros with a lot of money, and it's all over. He called you a criminal.
It's easier for him to blame an outside force than to admit that they were mismanaging their economy and their currency. The French finance minister talked about hanging speculators from lampposts.
Let's put a face to it. This is the man we're talking about. He is George Soros, arguably one of the most controversial figures in the world. With as many supporters as detractors, there are reports celebrating his philanthropy, also those questioning his ideas about the world. For some people, Soros is a legend, a financial guru, one of the most successful investors of all time. Yet some believe he's a man of malicious influence, a billionaire who is able to move markets, someone who can sway politics and opinion. So who is the real Soros? Why are writers selected based on their position against the current dispensation? Why are only organizations with a certain leaning made part of global investigations? They accuse others of bias. What about their own? Look at this headline from 2013, when at least 24 American journalists were given positions in the Obama administration. This included the managing editor of the Time magazine, the national security editor of the Washington Post, a Los Angeles Times columnist, a reporter from the New York Times, a political producer from CNN, and many others, some of whom are also part of the Biden administration. It gets murkier as you dig deeper. There's certainly a nexus that operates to alter political realities the world over, a nexus that runs from the political corridors of liberal powers to the many offices of the Open Society Foundation across the world. And every time this nexus is called out, its ecosystems go on a one-sided rant devoid of facts. Here's wishing them a busy weekend.
The United States and the other allies of Ukraine who are sending weapons must ask themselves this question. How much military assistance will Ukraine need to turn the tide of this war? And are the Western powers ready for this escalation?
Wolves hiding nearby, whispering.
Did you hear the explosion from
yes.
your position?
Yes, we did. Around me. You say your last goodnight.
Before the war began, the war in Ukraine, Russia accounted for about 1% of India's oil imports. Now it is 18%. So India is buying more and more Russian oil. I'm sure more Western lectures will follow. Will it make the same threats to China? Will it send the same message to Europe? Europe has been Russia's ATM. The European Union, they got the lion's share. How much? 61% of all Russian exports. These 6 countries paid almost $40 billion for Russian energy in 100 days. If you add the rest of Europe, it comes to $59 billion. That is what Europe paid to Russia. Just like Europe, China is buying other Russian energy exports as well. There was a major spike in the month of April. Chinese imports of Russian energy increased by 75%. This includes oil, gas, and coal imports. The West might criticize the world for buying energy, but it cannot put a stop to it.
Elite today who are responsible for controlling the world's central banks.
Hero, villain, businessman. However history judges Dmitry Firtash, one thing does seem to be clear. His country, Ukraine, needs him and his wealth right now.
Whether they get it, that depends on American justice.
It's an idea that would shift the economic balance of the world. Countries' wealth would depend on how much gold they have, not how many dollars they trade. And Libya has 144 tons of gold. The UK has double that, but 10 times the population.
If Gaddafi had an intent to try to reprice his oil or whatever else the country was selling in the global markets and accept something else as a currency, or maybe launch a gold dinar currency, any move such as that would certainly not be welcomed by the power elite today who are responsible for controlling the world's central banks.
When we went with him to Ukraine, he was treated like a visiting head of state and was received by the president. Then he was received by the prime minister and finally the central bank.
20% in cash.
They even allowed him to look at the books and asked him for advice. Lots of people want George Soros' advice. Most recently, South African President Nelson Mandela.
Actually, President Mandela asked me, how could South Africa protect itself against speculators like you? And I told him, I wrote him a memo, trying to give him the best advice I could, how to reduce the exposure of South Africa to speculative attack.
That's the old stop me before I kill again approach, right?
Well,
you're telling this is what you can do to stop me.
Whether I or somebody else does whatever is happening in the markets, it really doesn't make any difference to the outcome. I don't feel guilty because I'm engaged in an amoral activity which is not meant to have anything to do with guilt.
Part of the reason he is so rich is that the Soros hedge funds operate offshore in the Netherlands Antilles to avoid scrutiny by the Securities and Exchange Commission. So even while Soros tells Congress and the Treasury that hedge funds must be regulated to stop the global crisis, he's avoiding the rules.
Social credit deducted.
The real truth. Act now. On your own. Outside of the corporate systems and these incompetent politicians. Act now. It's our only hope for the future.
Freedom is slavery. Ignorance is strength.
What I'm trying to say is Ted Kaczynski was right.
The essential point that I want to make in all of this is that we, I think, are genuinely at a point of rupture in international relations.
Suggest otherwise would be Islamophobic.
Exactly. So somebody who exhibits this type of behavior is exhibiting ostrich logic.
And those that don't toe the line, they would lose their rights and privileges.
And boy has it ruffled some feathers to dive into a complex societal issue.